Are you feeling mentally exhausted by the never-ending pandemic? Are you worn out by the fact that this thing has more twists and turns than a soap opera episode? Would you like some practical advice to help get you through these challenging times that are dragging on and on and on and on and then on some more? Well, that's what I'm covering in this video. So get comfortable and let's talk about better mental health. Hello and welcome. I'm Jeremy Godwin, and this week on Better Mental Health, I'm going to share 15 ways to deal with the feelings of pandemic exhaustion that many of us are dealing with. I hope I'm not exhausted by the end. The thing is that, look, I don't care what people think about the pandemic or don't want to talk about it or whatever. At the moment, there's currently no end in sight, and this thing is dragging on longer than a cliffhanger on a reality television show. So, let's look at some ways to cope and manage in an effective way. Let's jump straight in with my first tip. Know that it's okay to feel a bit rubbish sometimes. You might have good days, average days, and then really crappy days, and that's to be expected. These are difficult times. These are extraordinary times, and there is so much information overload that it can make it tough just to maintain your balance when it's coming at you from all different angles. And that leads to tip number 2. Take things one day at a time. Okay, so I know that it's difficult to do this when you've been in lockdown for weeks or months on end, or if you're just seeing case numbers spiraling out of control wherever you are and seeing general stupidity going on. Anyway, the thing is that we can only ever focus on the present, and we can only ever focus on what we actually do. And all we can do is just take things one day at a time and see where the future takes us. No amount of worrying about the future is going to make it any easier. And I talked about that in episode 95 of the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast. So check that out for more on the subject, and it's linked in the description. Now, part of that involves my next point, practice acceptance, because the situation is the situation, and no amount of resisting that fact will change it, which I talked about in episode 36 of the podcast. When you learn how to accept things in a healthy way, it helps you to do my next point. Focus on what is within your control. Because I hate to break this to you, but all you can control is what you do and say, as well as what you choose to do with your feelings. Absolutely everything else in life is outside of your direct control. You know those times where you get annoyed because someone is doing something stupid or they're not wearing a mask properly? Yep, totally irritating, but out of your control. Instead of getting yourself worked up over that stuff, focus on what you can control, yourself. Next, be mindful. And this is about being fully present, which I explored in episode 83 of the podcast, and looking at ways to be more mindful and grounded in the present moment. Now, I'm sharing this tip because there is still so much uncertainty, but really, when you think about it, all we have for certain is this moment, right now. And so when we focus on making the most of the present, we learn to let go of our worries and our fears for the future, because the majority of the stuff that we might be worried about or that will or will not happen in the future is completely out of our direct control anyway. And so that leads to my next point. Have a daily routine. No matter what is going on and whether you are free to roam around this week or if you're facing ongoing restrictions and lockdowns, by creating a healthy daily routine, you help yourself to manage your time more thoughtfully. I'm not saying that you need to learn how to speak 16 foreign languages, but when you just wing it in terms of the day-to-day approach, it can be really easy to get distracted. And before you know it, you haven't showered in 5 weeks, and emergency services are having to peel you off your couch because you're stuck, and nobody wants that. Speaking of, my next tip is take care of yourself, because if you don't, who will? This is about being proactive in looking after your mind, body, and spirit. Consider what you consume, both physically and mentally, and have daily practices that help you to look after your health and well-being. Like my next point, limit your media intake. And I've talked about this a lot on this show and in my podcast. I can't imagine I'm enormously popular with the news services. And the fact is that the media does not tend to present that much in the way of positive news because we human beings tend to be much more focused on the negative. I promise you that you can stay up to date even if you only quickly check the news online once a day, which is what I do. And you'll feel much better for it. That leads me to my next point, less doom scrolling, more positive consumption. Have you ever found yourself watching the rolling news coverage or scrolling through content online and finding it really hard to stop? That's doom scrolling, and it will make your brain explode if you do it too often. Why? Because negativity attracts more negativity. Instead, choose to focus on consuming positive, optimistic, inspiring, and uplifting content, and keep the doom and gloom to the bare minimum. You don't have to wallow in the mud to know what's going on in the world. And more knowledge very often leads to feeling more crappy, so prioritize your well-being. You can still be informed while you do that. One easy way to do that is get outside as often as you can. I'm fortunate to have a backyard, and so now that the weather's warming up a bit and it's springtime or early spring here, I go out and work on my laptop as much as possible. But even if you don't have outdoor space, at least get outside for a walk or to stretch your legs as often as you can, or as often as you're allowed to if there are restrictions in place. Fresh air and sunshine usually makes us feel much better about ourselves, and more importantly, it helps us to clear our head. Next, set and maintain boundaries with anyone that you share space with. For many of us, we're not going out as much as we used to, if at all, depending on your situation and lockdowns. And so that means that if you share space with other people, then you might find yourself spending a lot more time together, and you might be feeling like you're on top of each other sometimes, or all of the time. Deal with this by having open and honest conversations and agree on some boundaries that will make life easier for both of you. Like my next point. If you're working from home, have a dedicated space. Because when you just work from wherever, it's great, it's handy, but it also makes it really hard for your mind to switch off at the end of your workday, which, by the way, you absolutely should be doing, so consider that to be tip 12A. When you're finished work for the day, pack everything up and put it away, or if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated room like I do, shut the door. And make sure that there is a clear physical and mental separation between your work life and your home life, because that's really important to help you recharge your batteries, especially if you are spending a massive amount of time in the same four walls over and over again. Number 13, if it's noisy at home, block it out. I have a very noisy neighbor with a very, very noisy little dog. And so if I need to focus, I put on noise cancelling headphones, or I just listen to music with earbuds to help me concentrate. Sometimes I don't even bother with the music. I just put the earphones on or the headphones, turn up the noise cancelling to full, and just sit in the cocoon of silence. And it's great until someone comes and taps you on the shoulder and you almost wet your pants. But, that's a whole other story. So, point number 14, have someone check in with you daily and vice versa. Because we human beings are, for the most part, very social creatures. And it's comforting to have regular conversations with other people. If you can't see the people that you care about in person, make time for a quick 5 or 10 minute video call every single day. Or go super retro and call them on the phone. I know, crazy, right? Don't let lack of physical connection be the reason why you lose your real quality connections with other people. And speaking of, be kind to yourself and to others. Because when we are kind, it tends to attract more kindness to us, which makes life far nicer than having to deal with nastiness and stupidity. And notice how I said be kind to yourself? Because the way you treat yourself helps to shape your sense of self-worth, which I discussed in episode 78 of the podcast. And it's also about treating yourself with self-respect, which I just talked about in episode 96. And besides, if you can't be kind to yourself, how can you expect others to be kind to you? And then my bonus tip, because even though I've done 15 points today, I'm still going to give you a bonus. So tip number 16 is talk about it. Because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. If you feel some type of way, talk to someone that you trust or speak to a professional. And do things for yourself as well. You might find the weekly Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast to be helpful in terms of more ideas on how to tackle specific aspects of mental health or deal with challenging times. And of course, it's linked in the description below. But do those things for yourself. So that's it for this episode. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you made it all the way to the end, leave me an up arrow emoji, because the only way is up. At least that's what Yaz said. Want more? Listen to the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast on your favorite podcast service each Sunday, or use the link in the description below. And watch this video next for more practical advice on better mental health, and click here to subscribe my channel for even more weekly advice on how to improve and maintain your mental health and well-being. Thanks so much for joining me today. Take care and talk to you next time.